Hi, this is Chris Brown with Digital Concierge, and this is going to be a short overview tutorial of a HTML5 framework that I built using what used to be Flash and is now called Adobe Animate. So here we are at the KCADDLC.org. This is the Digital Learning Center, our hub for our digital media department. So to get the HTML5 framework download files, go to Resources and Design and Interactive. And here underneath apps, you can see 3 links pertaining to the HTML5 framework. Now, we also have our Flash framework for code and examples for building native iOS and Android applications. We have our responsive web framework for using Bootstrap and Dreamweaver to create from scratch nicely responsive websites. And then we also have our Frenzied Game framework. All of these things, there's posts about them in the blog you can find deeper back. So onto the HTML5 framework. The point of this, I'm going to go ahead and open our responsive link, which is just going to open the framework in a HTML page that's set to kind of scale as the window scales. There's also a fixed size example that's centered in the middle. And then of course the download link, this will download the actual source files and the FLA file that you can open up and edit and use the code snippets yourself. So I'm opening up this, and the point of this was to really test the HTML5 canvas export capabilities out of Adobe Animate and just see, what we really able to get away with in terms of what we're used to using in the regular interface that we've been used to for so long. So here we have kind of a reboot of our initial Flash framework where we just had a few examples to do simple button code, simple things. So we'll just sit here, we have an introduction, I'm just going to go ahead and click next. And the first example here is just going next and previous, and a couple buttons, which is in effect also what we're doing down here. I want to point out that we do also have a hamburger menu up here. You can get to any of the links. But for right now, I'm just going to step through them one by one. So we can play an animation and go next and have a submenu, a little hop, wiggle, and fall. And then we can load some symbols dynamically from the library. We can load a ball symbol, and then we could load 100 balls, which are kind of randomly spaced and sized around the screen. And we can control a movie clip, so open a light box, and that opens a nice overlay, play an animation inside of it. And then we can play a sound or stop the sound and open an external link, which opens a new tab to Google, and then jump to page. So let's just go all the way back to the About page, jumping across, not using our back and next. So now we can use this to jump right back to that page. And then finally the message to say hello. And in order to see this, this is akin to using the trace command when using ActionScript. We go down and inspect the page and open up the JavaScript console. We can click on Say Hello, and it says Hello World. So that's kind of the front end, just some simple little items that we can put things together and make some pretty interesting interactive works to embed into modern responsive sites as an HTML5 canvas document or element that can be seen on all of the tablets and mobile devices as well as iOS. So let's go ahead, and if you download the files and unzip them, you're going to see this directory here that basically has some images that are broken apart, the 2 different index files, the responsive one and the centered fixed one, and then of course the FLA. This is the big one that we're going to open up and animate and just pick through for a minute. This is the HTML file that gets generated automatically, as well as the JavaScript file, the recover file because I had to open, and then the sounds in there. So you can take a quick look at the images. There's an animated GIF preloader and all these different image elements that are in it, and then of course our single audio sample. So I'm going to go ahead and open Animate, and looking at this, I'm going to start at the bottom. We have our simple background layer. Now again, this is a very rapid overview for someone that has some moderate level of experience using Flash or Adobe Animate. So I'm just going to kind of pick through what's different or what kind of stands out when building for HTML5 Canvas specifically. So we have our background layer that just sits behind everything. We can go ahead and lock that. Now the pages layer, this is the big one. This is the movie clip that holds. Looking at our library here, all of our different pages movie clips. We have a single movie clip for each of those different examples. And then of course we have all of our page assets over here that are used throughout, and then a couple of main interface elements if you want to get in here and change some things around with the symbols to make some of the examples your own. So inside of the pages movie clip and the main timeline, this is where all these examples are laid out according to frame labels across the timeline. So the first one, I'm just going to unlock all these layers, and inside of the About page, you can double click to go inside of it. Well, actually there aren't any examples inside of here, but this is where you can go in and just change all these different elements for an introduction slide or introduction page. And then as we move across to the next and previous, now we can actually go in and get some example of the code. Now the first thing I want to point out is that I just noticed it was a little sporadic. Sometimes it happened a lot, sometimes it didn't happen, but for the most part, sometimes when I would put the stop command just to stop the timeline before moving on to other frames, on the first frame it would get ignored. I noticed this a lot during testing, enough that throughout the whole framework I went ahead and just put all of the commands on the second frame. So you may notice that throughout, and I think that that's good to use until I hear there's been some kind of fix. So if I select that second frame on the actions layer, we have all of our regular elements. There's a graphic symbol made out of the ball and various elements of this animation. And I go in and open the actions panel. And one thing that's really prevalent is now that we're using JavaScript inside of this, it uses the this precursor to a lot of commands so that it doesn't interfere with any other JavaScript namespaces. So instead of the traditional stop command, now it's this dot stop, and that'll work. Again, I would recommend using the second frame. And then we're checking to see if it already has an event listener, because if we go back, forward and then back again, it will double up the event listener, so we don't want to do that. So we're checking to see if it already has it, and if it does, then we go ahead and create it. Now this is somewhat familiar. Again, there's the this before the item name, so the next button, add the event listener, and this is a click event. So it's a little more simple than the traditional like mouse down. And then the name of our function, go to next frame, and then another new item is this bind this. So you're binding it to, again, this particular namespace. So we're also adding to the previous button, and then we define our functions down here. We don't have any like return value, like a void if there isn't one. JavaScript is a little more of a forgiving language than ActionScript. And then again, before the command, we put this dot, go to and stop, and then this dot, current frame +1, and that takes us forward and back. So again, if you're familiar with writing regular button code event listeners in ActionScript, then this should look familiar enough to just see some of the difference and be able to start using it. So we go up from the pages and into the play animation one. I'll just go into each of these real quick as we go in, look at it again, the second frame, and this is very, very similar, even more simple, this dot stop, and then we're going to add the event listener in the exact same way. Again, this dot button name, binding it to this, and then down here this dot go to and play start. And that does our simple thing, and at the end, our this dot stop command. Our submenu is also really the same code, just having 3 buttons, adding the event listener to each one, and each one go to and play, different specific spot on the timeline. So these first 3 are really all the same button event. And now the load symbol. This one is a little bit fancier. I'm not going to go through it in complete detail, but when we set the click event of the load button, then we create a new variable that grabs a ball out of the library. So over here in our page assets, we find our ball. We can find that we right-clicked, went into the properties, and gave it a linkage identifier of ball, so we could talk to it in JavaScript over here. And then we're setting its x and y and adding it. And then when we add the 100 of them, we go through a for loop and add some random numbers by the size of the stage and randomize the scale. And that's what gives it that fun kind of splattering of orange circles all over the screen. And then control movie clip. This, I'll go back up to the main timeline in a moment and show you how, where this lives, the lightbox. But here, all we're doing is setting an event listener on the click again, and then we're going up the chain, this.parent.parent, so we're going up 2 levels. Right here, we're at target movie, we're going back up to pages, and then we're going up to the main scene 1 here. And then there's a lightbox movie clip sitting here. So we can traverse timelines like that, which is very, very powerful. Again, we don't need if you're used to the parent as movie clip in ActionScript, you can just go this.parent and then go back as far as you need. And we're just telling it to go to open. So it's a very, very powerful tool to be able to traverse timelines and tell other objects what to do. So then our play sound command, we just have a regular adding the sound to the timeline. And on the actions, we actually set some ActionScript to tell the sound to stop. So the play sound just goes to the right frame and hits it, so it's easy enough just to add sounds on the timeline. And then here's a very simple line, this create.js.sound.stop will stop all the sounds from playing at the same time. Then our external links, just to link out to a website. Here we are. We add the event listener the exact same way. Go to link, and we just have window.open. And in this case, we're using the underscore blank, which tells it to open in a new tab, which is usually what you want. And then our jump to page. Again, this just uses the this.parent and tells it to go to and stop about, so on the timeline above us. So again, same event listener, and just using the parent targeting to move up the timeline. Again, to move the other way in the timeline, you would name the movie clip on your timeline that you would want to enter into from there. And then the message to open in the JavaScript console, it's just console.log. Again, all these event listeners are the exact same, just setting these things to button clicks. And then you can go in the console.log. Now there's definitely other event listeners and a lot more that you can do looking through the reference material with Adobe Edge Animate and the JavaScript references that it has and the code snippets. And then there's also, you're just fully exposed to JavaScript. You can really do whatever you'd like in those windows. So from here, I'm going to go back up to Pages timeline, and then all the way up to Scene 1, and just show you the last 3 layers right here. So we have the header, which just has some elements that are on every screen, just a little bit of branding, and then the menu and the lightbox. Now these are simply just movie clips. There's nothing new about the way these are set up that we're used to building with for HTML5 Canvas. So the menu is the empty movie clip over here. I go inside of it, and it's nested inside this lightbox that is animated to open. And this is a couple of, again, I start on the second frame when there's more than one frame. If there's only one frame, you can leave it on the first, but if you are trying to stop it from playing into some other area, then you need to put it on the second frame. So again, we just put this.stop, and that's in a couple of places. And in this, we set up the lightbox close event listener, and then we can go inside of the lightbox element symbol from here, go another level deep, and it's just a regular animation here that loops. We'll go back into Scene 1, and in the actual menu, exact same kind of thing. Menu opens up, you can go into the menu, and well, each of these are just button symbols on the timeline, so we can use all of the button symbol states, work all the same in HTML5. Now I always recommend, even though it's tempting to do a lot of rollover stuff when you're working on your laptop, you want to make sure that you at least have the same effect, if not the only effect, to be on the down state, because that's really what touchscreens are respond to. There really isn't an overstate, or at least it doesn't happen until you touch it. So that's it. That is a very simple overview. Again, you can go download these files. From here, you can go into Properties and the Publish settings. You can go back up to the main scene. And there's actually some interesting Publish settings in here. If I deselect everything, you can get to them. And now, by default, we have JavaScript and HTML. You can set what its name is, some simple things, looping timeline, this and that. Now, this center stage, make responsive, scale to fit all visible area. These, you should play with these values. They, again, inside of the framework, there's a couple of them that are included. There's a responsive one. There's one that's centered horizontally and vertically and is a fixed size. Both of those are kind of mashups of what happens when you do this, and it will automatically, when you publish or when you just hit Command return to test your file, it'll automatically generate an HTML file and a JavaScript file, and then it'll also generate an images file and create the images and put them in there, as well as the sounds file. So these are all external elements. That's one thing to watch out for. Instead of being all encapsulated in a single SWF file, it actually creates this whole web directory. So again, an HTML file, a JavaScript file that really defines and runs everything. Every little thing is defined in JavaScript. So you could, in theory, get your hands dirty and get in there and wrangle some things manually if you had to, but it's really meant just to be used through the interface. And then, of course, the images and the sounds that are attached to it. So you could play with these values, see what happens with the different horizontally, vertically, or both as far as centering, and then the responsiveness, which really just makes it scale, and then different things to maybe fill the window completely, keep its aspect ratio or not. There's really a lot of publishing options here, as long as you're considering that you're not necessarily going to build an entire website, but you're going to build, either one, interactive piece or a piece of another website that is just, one HTML5 canvas element within all the rest of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's a preloader here, so you can define what your preloader is. You can actually find any kind of animated GIF and make it your preloader. So that's a really cool feature kind of built into there. You can browse and find your own. You can preview what the current one looks like, which popped up on my other monitor here. And then you can set whether, this is actually really interesting, you can set where the images, sounds, and then create JS assets if necessary. The different folder names, I really just leave them the defaults. But this is really interesting, this combine into sprite sheets. That I have this unchecked, so for the framework, if we, in the images here, we have separate files for each one. But if those of you who are used to, maybe working with, mobile games or real-time things like that that require the most performance, which you can get a lot of value out of in here, building with HTML5 for specifically mobile devices. You can combine all the images into a single sprite sheet or multiple sprite sheets, depending on how many they are, which initially puts all the images into one big image, which would be faster to only load once, and then programmatically grab the different pieces of it as your different images. So I hope that will give you a good little start to seeing that you can do quite a bit with traditional Flash skills and app development skills for the modern HTML5 web with the HTML5 canvas element that Adobe Animate exports. So enjoy animating and creating things, and you'll hear from me again soon about a VR framework that we're working on.